Morning, guys. I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School, and I thought we would break away from the normal series that we're working on right now. And I did an event this past weekend here in Ohio, and I taught a class on building a bug-out bag. And I've never really done a video on my interpretations of how to or what consists of or the things in a bug-out bag. What a bug-out bag really is, what it means, those type things. I've never really done a video on that. So I thought I would take the time today to shoot a video on building a bug-out bag. Okay, let's talk about bug-out bags for a minute and what that means, what that entails. To me, bugging out means that you're leaving one location that may not be safe anymore, and you're moving over distance to another location that you believe to be safe. And there could be multitudes of reasons for this. Natural disaster would be a good reason. Here in Southeast Ohio, flooding could be a reason for that. Tornadoes could be a reason for that. But you are moving from one unsafe place to a safe place. So the distance that you may have to move and how long it's going to take you to get there can definitely dictate what is in that bug out bag. The environment and season can definitely dictate what's in that bug out bag. So it's not as easy as building one little bag and throwing it in the corner and saying, this is my bug out bag. It should be something that is correct for the season, correct for the environment, correct for the amount of days and time that you may be traveling, and also light enough weight that you can travel. And that's important. I see lots of bug out bags out there that look like they weigh 100 pounds. You're not going to move very far over distance with a 100-pound backpack, especially if you're doing it through a wooded environment in this area where there's a lot of undulation of terrain. One of the biggest things that knocks people out of our basic survival classes is not being physically fit enough to carry their own gear. And we're not talking about an extreme amount of gear like some people put in a bug out bag. We're talking about normal everyday gear. So let's kind of break this down a little bit, talk about it, and have a better, deeper conversation about building our bug out bag. Now, lots of people are going to say, but Dave, what about the 10 C's? Dave, what about the 5 C's? All of those are going to be incorporated into this bug out bag that we're going to build. Again, it's just going to depend on how long we need to bug out or how long the distance is it takes us to get to the safe location, how many days of travel we have in between, and the time of year that we're in as well here in Ohio, because we're building this bag as if it were an Ohio bug out bag for this terrain and this environment. And right now in this season, which is early summer. Okay, so let's get that all out of the way first. Now, if we're going to move over distance, we have to keep things as lightweight as possible and as multifunctional as possible. And this is really no different than the base survival mentality that I teach at my school week in and week out to people about basic, intermediate, and advanced level survival. Now, when it comes to tools, and that would be the first thing I would think about when it comes to building any bag. So for a short-term bug out bag, and when I say short-term, 3-4 days it may take me to get from point A to point B on foot. I want to keep it as light as possible, and I want to have tools that are very multifunctional in nature. Now, I'm going to have a saw in this bag, and it is inside the pack, and we'll get to that in a minute, and I'll show it to you, but it's a Silky Big Boy. All right, that's going to process firewood as quickly as I need to process firewood if I need to stop for a night. I'm not going to carry an axe. I'm going to carry a shovel, something like this cold steel shovel. Will do 90% of what an axe will do in the short term if it needs to be very, very quick. It will limb, it will chop down small saplings, and it will bust up firewood if needs be as well, that an axe would serve the purpose of, but yet this will also dig holes to make shelters and things like that, dig cat holes, dig fire pits, all the things you're not going to want to do with an axe, and you certainly don't want to pick up a digging stick. It has a wooden handle, so it can be replaced on the fly if you break it, as long as you have something to take the screws out, and that's where your SAK comes in. A good solid belt knife from either Pathfinder Knife Shop, Essie Knives, Morgarberg, any of those heavy duty belt knives in that 4 to 5 inch range are going to be good. And then I would always have some type of SAK in my pocket that has a spare saw blade, a knife blade, a Phillips head screwdriver, and a couple of other tools on it to peripherally help me do things in case there's something I want to do, a small task, that larger knife might be too big and unwieldy to accomplish. And this is also the knife that I would use for processing any food if I need to process food, which we're going to get to in a minute, because we shouldn't be processing food in a bug out bag scenario. But this knife gives us lots of smaller tools that we can use as we travel. It also gives us that toothpick and that set of tweezers that are great for first aid, which we're going to talk about as a high priority when we're bugging out here in just a minute as well. So simple tools: belt knife, SAK, shovel, and a main saw. It's not going to add a lot of weight to your kit, but it's very multifunctional. Okay, so when we look at building a bag like this, really what we're doing is we want to address our survival priorities. And I talk about the top 5 survival priorities, and the last one is the one that really changes when it comes to bugging out. So our first priority is always going to be self-aid or first aid. We can't do anything else if we're bleeding out, obviously. If we can't breathe or we can't move, there's nothing else we can do. We have to address and fix that problem first. I always have a tourniquet on the outside of my pack somewhere. This one is at the ready on the shoulder strap if it's a bug out bag, so that I know exactly where it's at and I'm always going to be able to get to it as fast as possible. That's very, very important. Also have backups to this kind of stuff, like the belt that's around your waist, the shemagh that's in your bag, the utility paracord that's in your pocket. Backups are always good to have, but know that you have the real deal right here at the ready if you need it. Now, our second priority, and we'll talk more about self-aid because I don't carry a lot of self-aid measures with me because this tourniquet is my bleeding stopgap. Most everything else I can handle with duct tape and a bandana and plants around me if I know the Eastern Woodlands well, which I do. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't carry a first aid kit with you. Just don't get extravagant with that first aid kit and think that you have to have a bunch of vitamins and a bunch of drugs and things like that that aren't prescribed to you. Have things that will control bleeding, have things that you can splint things off with, things that you can isolate with. Those are the things that you want in a first aid kit if you carry one in addition to your bag. Now, our second priority is always going to be cover. And our cover is going to start with the clothing on our back. So we're going to want to dress for the proper season, have the proper clothing on, and then some type of outerwear in this pack that we can use in addition to that. And if our outerwear is also part of our shelter, again, it's a bonus because we have multifunctionality built into our gear. So let's kind of break this open for a minute and talk about that. And I'm kind of going back and forth with this pack a little bit just because of the way it's packed. It's packed as if I were going to need this stuff. So what's on top of my bag generally is food because I'm going to grab that out of the top whenever I stop for a meal. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Shemagh, that's my bandaging, that's my washcloth, that's for wiping down, filtering water before it goes into a main filter to get the debris and things out of it. Military style poncho, Helicon Tech. This is outerwear for rain. It is also a tarp over either a makeshift hammock, it's going to be fairly short, or on the ground. And I prefer to sleep on the ground if I'm thinking about a scenario like this. I would much rather just be able to throw something on the ground and sleep than to worry about, do I have the proper trees at the proper distance? And, where am I looking to put this hammock, blah, 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 blah. It's easier just to throw something on the ground anywhere you decide to stop. So remember that this is a piece of outerwear as well as a tarp because this is rain gear. Now, also in the bottom of this pack, and there's not a lot in here, there is a ground pad. This is a snug pack pad. It can be used either in a makeshift hammock or on the ground. So again, it's kind of multifunctional. It can be used for a sit pad if I need to stop. There's lots of things I can use this for, and it also floats when it's closed up. So it can also be a flotation device if I need it. Now, rope bag, bank line, paracord, stakes, rope management system. If you look up my video on cordage management, you'll see that stuff. But I do carry stakes with me. In any emergency bag or bug out bag, I would have stakes because I'm not going to take the time to make stakes or look for stakes when I can just carry either titanium or lightweight ABS and pound those in the ground as needed. I've got a pair of leather gloves in there, but again, that is part of our cover because we're going to use those anytime we're manipulating things around the ground area so we don't get poison ivy, we don't get stickers, we don't make things worse when we're trying to travel quickly. okay? Map case, talk about that in a few minutes. The last part of our cover that we have in here is we have a swagman roll. Swagman roll can be an underquilt for a hammock. It can be a sleeping bag. It can be something that we put under the poncho and we wear as outerwear to insulate us, or we can wear it standalone as outerwear to insulate us. So it's a very multifunctional piece of gear that's good to about 40 degrees. And when you combine that with the poncho itself, you got a pretty good layered system there that you can use down into a little bit colder weather than that, but definitely to get you out of the wind and rain if needs be, as well as on the ground for sleeping. So that pretty much covers everything that's inside the pack, other than one bug net bivy. This is a very old bivy sack made by Oware Tarps. I don't even know if they make it anymore, but it's just a flat bivy that you can lay out, stuff the sleeping pad into, stuff the swagman roll into, and it's bug proof. So again, weather environment dependent, but it doesn't weigh anything, and it is mesh. I've talked to you guys about this Power Film solar brick and solar panel in a past video. You can look that up to find out about this, but this gives me the capability to charge anything I need to charge, from radios all the way up to cell phones on the fly. And I can recharge this brick while I'm at it, okay? And then the only other thing in this bucket is the saw that we talked about, and it's on one side. So there's really not a lot in here. When you look at what's inside this pack, you have the swagman roll at the very bottom. You have a ground pad, a bivy sack that is a net and waterproof on the bottom. And on either side of that, you have your solar and you have your saw. All of those can be gotten to from the top of the pack just by opening it. Now, we'll keep the map bag out for a minute. We'll keep the rest of this out for a minute. We'll go ahead and put this rope bag back inside for now. So that covers us as far as cover elements go. And our shamag, again, is part of a cover element for shade, things like that, wrapping around our neck to keep in warmth, but also part of our first aid as well as our water filtration. So again, everything's working multifunctionally. Okay, once we get beyond our cover, we need to think about combustion. What can we do to start fire? Because that's going to, number one, give us the ability to stay warm. Number two, give us the ability to heat water and disinfect it from groundwater, pathogens, and things like that. We also have other ways to disinfect our water we'll talk about in here as well. But let's talk about combustion first. Always, always have a cigarette lighter in your pocket. A Bic lighter wrapped with some 1-inch duct tape. That is my number one fire starting resource, fire starting emergency kit right there. It's very, very simple. Doesn't need to be fancy, no matter what anybody tells you. Duct tape is flammable. You've got open flame with the lighter, you're good. Now, backups to that. In the top pouch of this pack, I have my compass, which is the Sunto MC2 that has a magnifying glass on it. I also have, inside here, I'm trying not to get everything out of here at once on you guys. So I'm just trying to fish around for what I'm looking for, which is a ferrocerium rod. Good 5 to 6 inch, 3/8 to 1/2 inch diameter ferrocerium rod, again, wrapped in duct tape. Does have a tungsten striker attached to it. This is the one we saw on our website. It's soft, it works. You don't have to do a lot of scraping on this thing. You can barely scrape it with this tungsten steel, and it throws sparks. I'm barely even touching that thing to throw those sparks. If you really get after it, you're gonna get a lot of sparks. So you got 3 ways of combustion. Now, there's one thing that we wanna talk about with combustion in here, and I'm gonna leave these things out of here so I know I've talked about them already. Okay, there's one other thing we wanna talk about as far as combustion with our bug-out bag. Whatever food we're carrying should be easily heated and only need hot water, or edible on the run. And if it's going to be something you need to heat water with, or you may need to disinfect water, and you want to have a backup to a filter, then you're gonna need some type of device that will give you open flame. And so I would tell you to carry a camp stove. Now, I'm gonna pull some things out of here that we're gonna talk about later as far as food, only because the camp stove is on the bottom of the pile. Mesh bag, very, very simple. There is one large can of fuel in here that's brand new. And there is one Coleman stove in here that's less than 20 bucks or 20 bucks on Amazon, but it's heavy duty. It's not some small frail thing that you would use backpacking. It's something that if you bang this thing around, it's still gonna work for you, no worries. Okay, so while we've got this stove out, we just did a demo on how it works. Very simple food. Again, short term, 3 days. We have 3 Just Add Water meals here by Stowaway Gourmet, 3 packets of Jiffy peanut butter that can be eaten on the fly, and 3 packets of Kopeka coffee. Very simple, quick and dirty, 3 days worth of food. If you want more, you can take it, but this is lightweight and easy. It doesn't take a whole lot to prepare. One thing I would shove in this bag along with the food is a long-handled spoon of some sort, just to be able to get down in those bags and eat, and it makes your life a lot easier. All right, our next priority is going to be water, and I keep all of my water kit basically outside this pack, except for the Shimog, which we talked about using as a pre-filter before we put water through a filter. We'll go into that in just a minute. So inside this bag are 2 or 3 devices. One of them is a large 30-liter dry bag, very flexible. This allows me to carry water from point A to point B. If my camp is possibly a good ways away from a water source, I can carry a large amount of water in this bag back to camp for disinfection. I can also use this inside the pack to waterproof everything, or use it to waterproof tinder sources and things like that for the next morning. Multifunctionality is the key. The next thing I have in here is a 32-ounce water bottle that can be used to boil water in if I want to. It's just a bottle and a lid. I can collect water with this. I can boil water in this. I can filter it through the bandana if I want to before I boil it or after I boil it. The last thing in this bag is my Grail GeoPress for disinfecting water on the fly. You can look up the specs on Grail. I trust it with my life. I've drank water all over the world in this thing. And as long as you're conscious about where you collect the water as far as turbidity, or filter that turbidity out first, this filter will last a long time, longer than you're going to be bugging out, and that is the key. Not how long will it last. Will it last longer than you're going to be bugging out? Yes, it will, unless you drink water like 2 elephants. There's a cup for this that is a prototype that has not been released yet, that will be released late third quarter of this year. That is a heavy-duty stainless steel cup with large batwing handles on it, and a lid that is made specifically to nest on this Grail, because this Grail is slightly tapered. There's no nice big cup on the market today that will fit this bottle correctly as an exact fit. It gives you another option of a steel container that you can use with this as a standalone kit for disinfecting water, so you can boil if possible or filter if it's not possible. And again, you have a lid that goes with that. So that's a very simple kit for disinfecting your water, but it's very effective, especially in the short term. And again, we're not talking about forever here. We're talking about the short term, okay? So we'll stuff that back in there and then we'll move on. Now, I like to give people options because, like I said, there's no such thing as the perfect bug out bag. And what's good for me may not be as good for you. What I trust, you may not trust. So you have to build your kit around what you're comfortable with. A second option would be to carry something like this large water bladder that's made by Mountain Safety Research at 6 liters. And it's made out of a heavy canvas type material. So you're not going to tear it up. You can take the large cap off of this thing to fill it up at the source here. And once you get back to camp, again, I would filter the water before you put it in here through a Shimog or a bandana. And once you get back to camp, you can plug some type of Sawyer filter into that if you want to, just like that, and hang it from a tree and make a gravity filter out of it. That will work fine too. However, my experience is, if you're not real careful, these will get clogged up on you. Again, how long does it have to last? As long as it takes you to bug out from point A to point B, not forever. So this is a good option. And it rolls up fairly flat. We put into a backpack. So our last priority, as far as our survival priorities in an emergency scenario, would be navigation, or signaling for rescue. Signaling is a form of communication, but I would probably circumvent that with communication period and navigation in a bug out scenario. You're probably going to want to communicate or at least be able to gather information while you're traveling. So we've got our compass we talked about already. We have a map of the area and a protractor so that we can plot grid coordinates if someone gives them to us. And then we should obviously have our cell phone that's fully charged in case it does work. And then we should have some type of a backup communication device like a radio. And I've done lots of videos on ham radio lately, and there's a reason for that. I believe it's important to be able to communicate if something happens that cell phones do not work correctly. Now, with that said, I'm going to tell you the same thing I told you when I started the ham radio series. Get yourself a cheap Baofeng, Bofwing, however you want to pronounce it, radio off Amazon. Learn how to unlock that radio. You can look at Just a Rubicon, has some fantastic videos on the UV5R. My buddy Josh Noss at Ham Radio Crash Course has some fantastic videos on that radio. There are some ins and outs to that you need to watch those videos to understand, but here's what I'm telling you. In an emergency situation, no one is coming after you because you talk on the wrong frequency or because you don't have the right license. Day to day, you should adhere to FCC rules, period. Being a good citizen. However, in an emergency, all bets are off. The difference between that cheap $25, $30 UV5R and something that costs $600 or $700 is that $600 or $700 radio is going to be very limited in the bands it can talk on. And you're either going to buy a GMRS radio that's going to talk on GMRS frequency only, and it may be $200 or $300, or you're going to buy something that's $500, $600, $700 that only works on ham bands, 2 meter, 70 centimeter, or you're going to buy something that is a cheap Radio Shack radio that only talks on FRS, or some mid-range GMRS radio in between that somewhere. Buying that $30, $25, $30 Baofeng radio and unlocking it allows you to hear everything from weather to GMRS, FRS, some of the ham bands, as well as other emergency services and things of that nature that are unencrypted. Can you talk on those bands? Legally, by FCC regulation, not without the proper license and the proper radio. However, again, we're saying emergency scenario. I want all I can get for my money. Get that. Then you'll have your communication pretty well stacked in place. Now, there's a couple other things we should talk about within this backpack that don't really fall into those exacting categories, kind of like the food didn't, but they're things to think about, okay? And some of them are things that I carry day to day anyway, because really this backpack is no different in most ways than the backpack I would take if I were going camping, for the most part. So I've got 4 disposable wipes, biodegradable. Again, I'm taking 3-4 days, right? I have a couple of notebooks in here right in the rain, and 1 or 2 pens to jot down notes and things like that. I have a roll of 1-inch duct tape in the top of this pack that I use as part of my self-aid, but also for repair. It's also good for fire starting, multi-functionality. That's what we're all about. Ferro rod we've already discussed. And then I have a camp rag in here by Super Essie Straps. That is orange on one side I can use for a waypoint marker if I'm exploring an area of the woods when I'm traveling. But it's also made out of Kevlar material, so I can use it to grab things off the fire, use it to protect the hand if I'm cutting, all those types of things. It works well for, and again, it doesn't take up very much room in the pack. So it gives you a good utility rag. I have a cigarette lighter in the top of this pack that's in an Exotac waterproof case. Multiple cigarette lighters, one in my pocket, one in my pack. I have a black diamond headlight with multiple modes, including flash and spare batteries for that headlight. And then charging cables for not only the phone, also for the radio. One more pen, okay? Those are the things that I'm carrying, and these cables will plug into that large brick we talked about from Power Foam, so I can charge all the things I need to charge on the fly. So those are the things that I generally keep in the top of this pack that are kind of my ready access things in the top exterior pocket of this pack that I may need to get to right away and on the fly. Everything else that you saw goes inside the pack itself. Those things always ride at the ready, along with the compass that goes in there as well. Now, a couple more things real fast, okay? There's gonna be people that are gonna say, I would not have a hammock. I would not have a hammock. Okay, that's fine. My preference would not be that if I had to sleep anywhere I could flop. A hammock may not be the ideal thing. However, what you can do is carry something multifunctional. And what I've got in this dry bag, which could fit into that pack, especially if I took one thing out, and again, you're gonna have to swap things in and out, is a Vietnam era military jungle hammock. This thing is waterproof, so it will make a ground sheet on the ground if I want to sleep on the ground with it and put my pad on top of it. But it also makes a fairly short hammock with nothing but paracord or rope. So it's very good for a makeshift quick and dirty hammock if I need it. And then there's also a full-on 8x8 O-Wear tarp in here. I've had this O-Wear tarp for probably 10 years, and it's still fine, it's still serviceable. However, I don't think something that's an 8x8 is necessary for sleeping on the ground. I can use a poncho for that. That's more multifunctional to sleep on the ground in some kind of a burrito roll, as a shelter, or as outerwear, where these things won't work for that. But if you insist on a hammock, I would go with a system that's very simple like this, so that it does become more multifunctional for you in the end, and it will fit into a very small bag that's not going to take up a lot of room inside your pack, and it's going to be waterproof at the same time, so you can carry water over distance with that bag or collect water in that bag if you need to. Okay, so before we go, I know what you're thinking. He didn't say anything about firearms. You're right, he didn't. Not because I don't think it's important, because showing firearms on YouTube is the quickest way to get your channel and your stuff demonetized, or at least limited in who gets to see it and who can advertise on your videos. So I wanted a lot of people to be able to see this video, so I did not put a firearm in the video. However, we can talk about that here at the end of the video if you stuck around that long. Here's my take on it. Again, point A to point B as fast as I can get there. I'm not worried about hunting. I'm not worried about getting food. I'm carrying that with me. All I'm worried about is eliminating a threat along the way. A smaller caliber, 9mm, semi-automatic handgun, Glock 19, pretty much operate the slide, pull the trigger, she's gonna go bang. It's very simple. 9mm ammo is very common. That's your best bet. If you wanna carry extra ammo, carry it in 30-round magazines. 2 of those magazines in your backpack along with the mag in the gun is gonna give you a full box of ammo on top of what you have in the gun that's ready to be used in the gun if needs be. If you decide you're going to have a long gun for some reason, I just have to have it, I don't feel right without a long gun in my bug-out bag, I would tell you to find something the same caliber that's reliable as your handgun. Same caliber that's reliable as your handgun. I can give you an example of that in my case. I would say if you're going to carry a long gun, you think you need that capability with your sidearm, Kel-Tec Sub 2000 is a good 9mm, and it takes Glock magazines. So the same magazines that fit the Glock 19 fit the Kel-Tec Sub 2000, and it gives you a longer gun with the same ammunition and the same magazines. That's my thought process when it comes to that stuff. And I've talked to you guys about that kind of stuff over and over again in other videos. But for me, the simplest sidearm to carry for a bug-out bag scenario, what I would carry would just be a Glock 19. Because again, I'm just trying to quickly eliminate a single threat. I'm not trying to hunt. I'm not trying to forage. None of that stuff. I just want to get from point A to point B as fast as possible. Guys, I appreciate you doing for this video today. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, and for our business, for all of our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends. And I'll be back to another video as soon as I can, guys. Thanks for your views.